Think about the last time you watched a group of children play. Within minutes, sometimes within seconds, something happens that no adult arranged. One child starts talking. The others listen. One child points in a direction. The others follow. Nobody voted. Nobody was appointed. And yet, somehow, a leader emerged. You might assume that child was just louder. More confident. Maybe a bit pushier. But the real explanation for why some children naturally lead and others naturally follow is far stranger than personality. And once you understand what is actually driving it, you will never look at a playground the same way again. Leadership in children is not what you think it is. It is not about dominance. It is not about aggression. And it is almost certainly not something that was decided the moment that child was born. What is happening inside the brains and bodies of children who lead is a specific, measurable, and surprisingly ancient set of processes, and understanding them changes everything about how you raise, teach, and respond to the children in your life. To understand where child leadership comes from, you have to start somewhere unexpected. You have to start with stress. In 2008, researchers at the University of California, San Francisco began studying what they called the stress response profiles of young children. What they found was that children do not all respond to uncertainty the same way. When placed in an unfamiliar situation, a new room, a new group of peers, an ambiguous task with no clear instructions, some children's nervous systems activated in a very particular way. Their cortisol levels rose, yes, but something else happened too. Their brains began scanning for patterns. For structure. For what needed to happen next. And then, rather than waiting for someone else to act, they acted first. These children were not fearless. They were not calm. They were, in many cases, just as activated as the children who hung back. But their activation translated into forward motion instead of stillness. The researchers called this a proactive stress response. And it turned out to be one of the earliest measurable predictors of leadership behavior in group settings. The children who followed did not have a broken stress response. They had a different one. Their nervous systems, when faced with ambiguity, defaulted to a monitoring mode, watching, gathering information, assessing before committing. This is not weakness. This is, in evolutionary terms, an extraordinarily valuable trait. A group that has some members who act and some members who watch is a group that survives more situations than a group made entirely of either. This is the first thing most people miss about child leadership. It is not a hierarchy of better and worse. It is a distribution of roles that the human species has been running for hundreds of thousands of years. But stress response is only part of the story. What turns that proactive activation into actual leadership behavior is something that happens in a very specific region of the brain. The prefrontal cortex, the same region you now know develops slowly in children, contains circuits that are responsible for what neuroscientists call executive function. Planning. Impulse control. The ability to hold a goal in mind while managing the distractions pulling at you from every direction. Children who show early leadership behaviors consistently show earlier and more robust development of these circuits. Not because they were born with a bigger prefrontal cortex, but because something in their early experience began activating and strengthening those circuits sooner. Adele Diamond, whose decades of research at the University of British Columbia have made her one of the world's leading authorities on executive function in children, has shown that these circuits are extraordinarily sensitive to early environment. Children who were given regular opportunities to make real choices, not fake choices, not managed choices, but genuine decisions with genuine consequences, showed accelerated development of the planning and goal-holding circuits associated with leadership. Children who were more directed, more managed, more told what to do at every turn, showed slower development of those same circuits. This does not mean that children who follow are permanently behind. It means that the environment in which a child grows up is actively sculpting which cognitive circuits get the most use, and the circuits that get the most use are the ones that grow strongest. Now here is where it gets counterintuitive. When researchers at the University of Virginia studied how children self-organize in groups, how they naturally form hierarchies without adult instruction, they discovered something that upended the common assumption about what made a leader. It was not the loudest child. It was not the most physically imposing child. It was not even the most confident child in the conventional sense of the word. The children who emerged as leaders in peer groups were disproportionately the children who were the best at reading the emotional states of the others in the group. Social cognition. The ability to model what another person is thinking, feeling, wanting, and needing, and then act in a way that addresses those states. This is what the emerging leaders were doing, often unconsciously, from the first moments of group interaction. They were not imposing a direction. They were identifying what the group needed, and then moving toward it in a way that others recognized as useful. This is why child leadership and child popularity are not the same thing. Popular children are liked. Leader children are followed. And the mechanism behind being followed is not charm, it is relevance. The child who notices that another child is confused and explains the rules. The child who sees that the game has stalled and introduces a new element to get it moving again. The child who resolves the conflict before it becomes a fight. These children are not performing leadership. They are solving problems. And the other children follow them because those solutions work. The researcher Jean Decety at the University of Chicago has spent years mapping the neural substrates of empathy in children and has found that what looks like social leadership ability in young children correlates strongly with activity in the circuits responsible for perspective taking. Children who show early empathic accuracy, the ability to correctly identify what another person is experiencing, show up disproportionately in leadership roles and peer groups. Not because empathy makes you popular. Because empathy makes you effective. So what about the children who follow? Are they simply less empathic? Less developed? The answer is no, and this is the part that most conversations about child leadership completely ignore. Children who naturally occupy follower roles in groups are, in many cases, running a fundamentally different but equally sophisticated cognitive strategy. They are not failing to lead. They are choosing, at a deep neurological level, to gather more information before committing to a direction. This strategy produces extraordinary outcomes in the right circumstances. The careful child. The observant child. The child who waits until they understand the full situation before they speak. These children often produce the most accurate assessments of a situation precisely because they did not rush to act. What determines which strategy a child defaults to? Temperament plays a role. The work of Jerome Kagan at Harvard, who spent 40 years tracking the developmental trajectories of children with different temperamental profiles, showed that behaviorally inhibited children, those who naturally hang back in new situations, are not on a developmental pathway to permanent followership. They are on a pathway to a particular kind of leadership that tends to emerge later, in contexts where depth of understanding matters more than speed of action. The quiet child who becomes the one everyone trusts to tell them the truth. The careful child who becomes the one everyone turns to when the decision actually matters. The environment reshapes all of this constantly. A child placed in a group where their particular strengths are visible will lead. That same child placed in a group where their strengths are invisible will follow. Leadership is not a fixed property of a person. It is an emergent property of a person in a context. And the child who always follows in one context may be the undisputed leader in another, and both roles are real, and both roles matter. What can you do with this as a parent or teacher? The research points in a clear direction. Children who are given genuine agency, real problems to solve, real decisions to make, real consequences to navigate, develop the executive circuits and social cognitive skills that underlie leadership faster than children who are directed through every situation. This does not mean removing support. It means creating the conditions for a child to lead from where they are, in the contexts where their particular combination of skills is most visible. Watch for the child who resolves the conflict rather than starting it. Watch for the child who reorganizes the game when it stalls rather than walking away. Watch for the child who notices when someone else is upset and does something about it. These are the signals that the leadership circuits are active and growing, and they can be growing in the quietest child in the room just as powerfully as in the loudest one. The child who stood up first on that playground, the one everyone followed, was not more special. They were not more deserving. They were running a particular cognitive and emotional pattern that, in that moment, in that context, with that specific group of peers, happened to match what the situation needed. And the child who waited, who watched, who assessed before they moved, they were not less. They were not behind. They were building something too. Something that would emerge in its own context, in its own time, with its own kind of force. The next time you watch children play, and you see one child step forward while the others watch, remember what you now know. You are not watching a future boss and a group of future employees. You are watching an ancient system do exactly what it was designed to do, distribute the cognitive labor of navigating an uncertain world across a group of people who each bring something different and something necessary. That child who just said follow me? They are not leading because they are better. They are leading because the group, in this moment, needs exactly what they have. And the child standing just behind them, watching carefully, deciding whether to trust this direction, they are not following because they are less. They are following because the group, in this moment, needs exactly what they have too.